Hey, there we are. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lane Wilhite. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I wanted to spend just a couple of moments today talking to you a little bit about maybe some things that seem a little self-explanatory. So what am I referring to? Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about controlling the controllable. So a little bit of a play on words there, but ultimately sometimes we can overcomplicate this job. Recruitment is, in essence, a very difficult thing to do, but when you start doing this long enough, you start to see certain patterns, certain little nuances, certain things that don't really take a lot of effort to change. They just take the ability to step back from your own process or your own recruitment endeavor to really identify maybe some shortcomings or maybe just areas you could maybe hone your craft and your opportunity just a little bit. So the reality is that you can't change certain facets of your opportunity. You can't relocate a town, you can't change what the local school systems are like, you can't change taxes, you can't change what Google shows online about a recent tornado, a fire, a snowstorm, a flood. One of these uncontrollable things that happen to your local town. Having a tornado hit your small town a week after beginning recruitment can seem very daunting to overcome. So there's a lot of things like those, for example, that just simply can't be altered. However, I do think there are two areas specifically that I wanted to talk about today, and those two are your product and your process. So again, sometimes if we step back from these two, for example, and kind of look at the whole pie chart, maybe there's areas you can increase the marketability of your opportunity without changing any of the dollars and cents about the job. So going back to that first one I mentioned, which is your product, okay? Your job, in essence, is your widget. Ultimately, you're selling a dream, you're selling a lifestyle, you're selling a community, a paycheck, a patient population. All of these things are very important to the overall overlooming look at your opportunity. But if we strip all of that away, ultimately, what does the job on paper look like that you're asking a provider to accept? And again, some of this is going to seem a little obvious, so I understand if there's some eye rolling, but I assure you, hopefully there's a few takeaways that you might gain from this. So looking at certain modifiers that could change your job as it stands in the marketplace, again, can sometimes mean things that don't have any sort of monetary change or impact on the opportunity itself. So let me ramble off a few quick examples. Um, One of the biggest buzzwords right now in the industry that I'm getting constantly from physicians I speak with is pertaining to the quality of life, right? We're at a point now where people are very much more tuned into the time off with family, the predictability of a schedule, being home at dinner at a reasonable time. These are all the typical complaints that I hear pretty frequently from physicians already in practice, as well as those that are looking to get into that first practice. So looking at shorter work weeks, a 4-day work week, perhaps if it's a specialty where there needs to be a call during the week, let's just say for obstetrics, for example, if you've got an OB-G where they're on call on Tuesdays, I have a few different facilities where they'll make sure Wednesday morning there is no clinic for that provider. So that's just one quick example. You could also look at loan repayment, paid call. I had a hospitalist who the biggest takeaway for him in accepting the opportunity was that they were going to provide him an office with a window to dictate from. So he had a view when he was doing his dictations. Cheesy, I know, it seems simple, but that one thing I think was really the icing on the cake that helped us push him over the edge in accepting the opportunity. Local gym memberships. I've got several different clients who are pretty good about making sure that we either help pay for your car allowance, your cell phone bill, or the local gym membership, or even local country club membership. I've had a few of those offered. So some of these things that I'm giving as examples, I recognize are somewhat situational based on the location, the candidate, what he or she's interested in, all of those things. So I take that into consideration, but I'm just trying to give maybe, again, some examples that maybe help you kind of, again, look back at your process. Different earning potential options here, whether it's picking up moonlight shifts in the ER. I've got a few locations that are able to do that. So that's another ancillary way that somebody can go above their earning potential and make your job that much more marketable, at least from that financial package standpoint. One recent example I'd give is the opportunity for mission trip time. So this organization not only has its CME allowance, its sick leave, its standard PTO, but it also has a set amount of time for somebody to do a mission trip. which was extremely important to one of the most recent hires we made because that was something that he's been doing for the better part of 2 decades. So these are just some things that are, again, are kind of unique modifiers to your job that may or may not carry any sort of monetary change or requirements, if you will. Stipends for residents and directorships is probably the last example I'll give you in that regard. So looking at your opportunity, recognizing that, hey, sometimes there is a budgetary restriction on what I can or cannot pay for a base salary. I also recognize that based on where you are in the country and what type of facility you are, that also impacts what you can offer from a base salary standpoint. So sometimes looking at the other ways you can maybe tailor that is what I'm going for here. Another thing that I would mention along the idea of your product, stripping it again down to just the nuts and bolts of what an offer letter or a contract is going to articulate to an interested candidate, you want to look at things that, again, may be hot buttons for the candidate upon the interview. So one example is if they make mention of efficiency woes with their current practice. If you know that your clinic is very, very good at being efficient, whether that's because of the overall flow of the clinic, whether that's the support staff that's oh so vital in making sure that patient care moves quickly, or maybe it's your new EMR system that you've implemented. These are all just obvious examples, again, that are going to help you understand, okay, these are the pain points for this particular provider. He's unhappy because of his current clinic is too slow. He's staying late for dictation. He's having to, spend extra time in the clinic on a Saturday in order to hit what he feels is going to be his RVU threshold. So if there are things, whether it's a scribe in the clinic, if that's something you've considered, I do know there's a cost associated with that, but sometimes that can pay for itself rather quickly if you have happier providers that can see more patients because of this efficiency that you've put in place, i.e. the scribe. Nurse practitioner oversight. I have a few facilities where the nearest tertiary center is quite a ways away. So they've developed an EICU. And the neat thing there is that, of course, gives this other candidate that reassurance that, hey, I've got somebody here that I can lean on in an emergency or in a unique acute situation. So those are just a few quick examples I wanted to touch on. Again, we're going to have plenty of opportunities in the future to go down into these individually in a little more detailed basis. The second thing I wanted to talk about today is your process, okay? So let's start with the basic obvious things like logistics, okay? Travel arrangements. Now, I recognize every facility does things a little bit differently, but there are usually 2 columns, if you will, that most facilities fall within, and that's either I'm required by corporate to pay for all physician travel up front. We have certain forms that are required to be filled out. We direct bill the hotel. We do everything so that there's really no out-of-pocket cost from the physician up front, and that's just how we've always done it. There's definite benefits to that, especially if this is a resident who, again, as you all know, is not making a lot of money. Maybe he's been on 2 or 3 interviews and he's already got $3,000 stacked up on his credit card. Maybe he's got a new baby on the way. There's a lot of circumstances that would indicate that if somebody were able to pay for the physician up front, that's almost, if nothing more, good karma, okay? The other column, if you will, would be, which I've also historically done a lot of, which would be that if we have the physician pay for their travel on their credit card, not only do they have some financial skin in the game, but I'm also able to help take that off of my CEO's plate by helping with the efficiency of booking said travel. So I'll actually go in, pull the flights with my travel agent, make sure the times departing and leaving, or I guess departing and arriving work for the physician. And then also, of course, making sure if they have a really difficult time getting a weekday off, I've got some really creative hospitals and clinics that do a really good job of making utilization of their weekend time, which I know, again, that's a whole different animal we can talk about as well. But again, either paying for the flights up front and helping out the physician from a financial standpoint, or just being very expedient on the back end and timely reimbursement. There's nothing that can kill a positive interview quicker than having somebody who's been waiting for a month, 2 months, 3 months for reimbursement on a $1,500 interview. So if whichever one of those you go down, just make sure that you've maybe identified, okay, who's actually booking the travel, how efficient are they in turning things around quickly, and then how efficient are we from a billing standpoint able to turn around and get the candidate reimbursed quickly. Further on the airfare, of course, we also have the hotel arrangements, making sure that it's either a new hotel that you personally utilize time and time again with positive feedback. I have certain locations where they have access to a really unique Airbnb, or Maybe the hospital owns a small house in town that they could use for free, or on rare occasions, I've had even an example of a local lake cabin that was just as close as maybe the nearest hotel, but was actually nicer and was going to provide the candidate with a little bit more of that, maybe that lifestyle that they're looking for, assuming they're outdoor oriented. So wherever the hotel is that you end up putting up your candidate at, whether it's direct build or not, make sure that you've vetted it out thoroughly, make sure you understand who is going to be at the front desk and what type of ambiance is going to be there. And then of course, the next thing I would advocate is if you aren't already doing it, a gift basket in the hotel room goes a long ways. It's a relatively inexpensive monetary investment, but it is almost always one of the first things I hear back when I'm getting feedback after an interview from the candidate. Oh my gosh, Lane, you wouldn't believe it. I got to the hotel room and there was a bottle of wine with a gift basket, and there was local, sporting goods memorabilia there from the team that I mentioned to somebody that we liked. Those are the things that are very impressionable upon candidates as well. Maybe one other quick example I'd give to you on this is I have a few different facilities or people where they'll actually electively go meet the candidate at the airport on the evening or day of the arrival, so that there's a familiar face, somebody looking for them, somebody that's going to be able to say, hey, so excited to have you here. Can't wait to get you to look around the town as well as the facility. But before we do that, let's go over and get your rental car. And they would walk them over to the rental car counter, make sure there was no issues there. And then go, hey, no big deal. I'm going to have you follow me over to the hotel so you don't have to worry about it. These are all just things that, again, maybe seem a little hand-holding, but at the same time, it really does alleviate a certain amount of anxiety, because now the candidate's not stressed out about missing their turn or not knowing the layout of the town, or maybe the hotel from the airport is a good 30-minute drive. Now they know they've got somebody that's going to make sure they get there safely, and you've already started that rapport too. So I've seen that work extremely well. I've had physicians get picked up directly by the point of contact on site, so they've never had to set foot in a rental car. That saves a little bit of money, but it also allows you to have more of these one-off conversations in the car where you're building rapport. So if you've got a really good point of contact or somebody that's managing the on-site visit, those conversations tend to go a lot further than you might think. One other example I'd give briefly was also, I had a point of contact who'd been doing this for a long time, so he had this down to an art. So he understood a lot of what I'm talking about with you now. And one example is that if he knew that the morning of the interview was going to start at this time, based on when the sun was coming up over the hospital, just based on how the layout in this particular town worked, the sun would organically kind of come up over the hospital based on where the hotels were as they were driving west to east. And it would inevitably present this very scenic, organic picture of the hospital in all of its glory with the sunrise coming up over it. So again, I know you're probably rolling your eyes, it's a little cheesy, but it was a subconscious thing that happened. And he did it again with candidates after dinner, so they drove by at night when the hospital was lit up. Now, again, I recognize every hospital and facility is a little bit different. So if your facility doesn't have that type of aura about it, then we need to figure out or identify what else you could be doing creatively like that. Another part of the process I wanted to spend just a moment on is controlling the message. Again, a bit obvious to point out perhaps, but how is your site visit conducted? What is your process? More importantly, who are your key players? I think a lot of times one of the first things I identify is that the process may not be broken with a particular organization, but they may be having either tests run through it enough. Maybe somebody calls in sick that day, or there's some sort of emergency within the hospital that requires this C-level person to will no longer be available to lead this particular portion of the interview. And now we're scrambling to fill that in. We think it's okay, but maybe that portion of the interview didn't go as well as normal. So it really does come down to overanalyzing this to a certain degree, making sure that you understand your process and how you're not only beginning the actual interview, whether it's somebody picking the candidate up at the hotel or airport, and then also how you're transitioning at the end of the interview. So talking about flexibility on when you can interview somebody, making sure that if weekends, again, are a bit difficult to do, but a candidate is very willing to come out on a Sunday, Monday type of trip, having a group of people that can do that on short notice is what usually makes for a very successful recruitment endeavor. Charming realtor is another quick piece I would mention if you haven't personally met with the realtor or you don't know what their tour looks like. then we'd certainly want to make sure that you're going to be able to simply get the best time usage of the realtor or person showing the community off to your candidate. One of the other last things I was going to mention is, as far as your process goes, it's great if you have a very well thought out, thorough on-site visit, but if we don't talk about this timeline and this finality of the process or the interview visit, if there's no roadmap there, that's where sometimes I'll see a lot of hard work and effort and time invested on the organization's part to make sure that the interview goes extremely well. But then we get to this crucial moment where we're sending a candidate off, maybe the site visit went extremely well, and we know we already want to move forward with an offer. Sometimes that, of course, is going to vary as well, just based on your group of decision makers and how the structuring of the hiring works. If you know that the group is going to need to meet with one another the following Monday, if let's say the interview took place on a Friday, yes, again, I know that there's going to be exceptions to some of these things I mentioned, but the point of it is that you need to have a timeline, whether that's sending the candidate off to the airport and saying, hey, I really enjoyed meeting with you. I think we all did. I'm going to meet with so-and-so and so-and-so, and I'm going to have an email to you with an update by next Tuesday. Whatever that time frame is, if you're able to articulate that to a candidate and show them, hey, we enjoyed your time. We appreciate and value the time you provided us by coming out here, and we are going to get back to you on this date. One, you're adding value to your opportunity. You're giving them a call to action, whether or not they know it. And three, you're also setting up yourself to show the accountability that your organization hopefully exemplifies. So the caveat to that, what I just said is, you certainly need to make sure if you do set a certain not deadline, but perhaps a time frame for the next steps, we just want to make sure we adhere to it. Whether that's sending home a candidate with an offer letter or a closing tool and saying, hey, this is what I want you to look over. Whatever those next steps are, just make sure that maybe you've spent a few moments talking about what the end of the interview looks like. Who is the last person that's going to speak with or shake hands with the candidate before they leave? Is it anticlimactic? Is it kind of left up in the air? Are they going to go look around on their own right after you did all that heavy lifting and then maybe find the bad part of town that we could have maybe not kept them from eventually seeing, but we could have controlled that part of the process just all the way to the completion of it. So sticking to that timeline is important, having a roadmap for the interview itself, and then talking about modifying the overall opportunity, whether it's, again, paid call, some of those things. So showing the accountability and making sure that you've given thought to both your product and your process are just two quick ways I think you're going to be able to maybe identify some areas you can continue to improve your overall recruitment efforts. Again, I thank you for your time today. If there are any questions, please either feel free to reach out to me directly at lwilhite@adaptivemedicalpartners.com. Wilhite spelled with 2 L's, or you can also just go check us out online. We have a great website, adaptivemedicalpartners.com, and we are on both LinkedIn and, of course, all the social media. So check us out. Stay tuned. Lots more exciting stuff to follow, and look forward to talking with you again on the next webinar.